Alrighty, good morning everyone and thank you for joining this webinar today. My name's Tori and I'm the Marketing and Communications Officer at Connecting Up. Our webinar today is on a new product added to the donations program. It's called Infrastructure as a Service and will be presented by Jason Neville. He's the General Manager and Technical Director at RNG Technologies. If you have any questions as we go along, please type them in the question box on your webinar panel and we will answer them throughout the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, so you will be sent a link with the slides and presentation. I'll now hand it over to Jason. Take it away.
Hi everyone. So thanks for that kind introduction. My name is Jason Neville. I'm representing RNG Technologies and we've been aligned as the partner for this particular product, or for Infrastructure as a Service for Connecting Up. Joining me in the webinar today is Ryan Tucker, who's one of our engineers here behind the scenes. Both of us, in addition to presenting this new piece, we'll also be able to handle some of the questions, perhaps trailing at the end. So coming on through, obviously, as I said, that's me. I apologise for the mugshot. The agenda today will be that we'll be covering off on the new partnership between Connecting Up and RNG Technologies for the Infrastructure as a Service platform. We'll be covering off a bit of a technical overview of the platform itself, leading into I suppose a demonstration of the provisioning portal's capabilities. So some of the more IT-influenced aspects of managing the system itself. We'll be talking a little bit about how we can best leverage the system and I suppose still maintain control, something that is always a bit of a stigma with cloud, as it were. So we'll talk about how you can obviously continue to maintain the same levels of control that you currently experience. We'll talk a little bit about some licensing considerations, not just those within the cloud environment, but also specifically how they relate to not-for-profits and obviously with access to donor tech licensing and such. We'll talk just a little bit about the pricing. Obviously there's a lot of detail on the website, so I'm happy to handle any questions around that. And then lastly, just obviously accessing the solution itself. So first of all, a quote from the CEO. Connecting Up has joined forces with RNG Technologies to deliver an affordable, reliable and locally hosted infrastructure as a service platform to meet the needs for the not-for-profit organisations. So as discussed, it's a fairly new joint venture between the organisations, and hopefully there'll be a bit of uptake and obviously many organisations benefiting from this. RNG's partnership with Connecting Up was aligned through a number of key factors. Obviously, there was an identified need for cost-effective infrastructure as a service within the not-for-profit sector, something that Connecting Up obviously great at facilitating those types of things. They then approached a number of vendors, of which we were one, and there was an evaluation based on things like where the technology was located, alignment with vision, flexibility of the service, and ultimately pricing. And obviously, we're here today to talk about those things because we were able to achieve that alignment. So a little bit about us and our partnership. RNG Technologies is an IT services and cloud service provider. We've been around since about 2002. We headquartered in Brisbane, but do have a national support and service coverage. We have a particular focus on the not-for-profit sector, although we do service many industries, and that's been largely the last 7 years predominantly. Our existing cloud platform already hosts several hundred users nationally, and obviously continuing to grow, which is a good thing. We also have a number of certifications around the environment itself, ACMO and various other bits and pieces. So a couple of pictures there are just the data center itself. Any prospective users that are actually in the Brisbane area, we're always quite happy to do a walk around the facility as well, so just something to bear in mind. Actually, just carrying on. Sorry, I lost my mouse for a second. Okay, a bit of a technical overview. So the solution itself is based on Hyper-V. So for those of you who are more familiar with or using VMware, unfortunately that is a decision that's been made. That said, if you have existing VMware infrastructure, there are ways that we can facilitate a migration, so don't be alarmed too much. It's based on the Azure Pack Administration Console. So if you're not familiar with that, what that means is that the same set of web portals that Microsoft themselves use within their Azure-based system, they've released to service providers like ourselves for use within essentially private cloud type environments. So all the UI, the use of the system should be fairly familiar if that's a solution you use. If not, learn one, learn them all. As mentioned, the data center is housed here locally in the Brisbane Technology Park, a facility called Host Networks, which conveniently is actually housed right next door to R&G Technologies office, so obviously quite handy for any emergency situations if at all, touch wood, they occur. The equipment itself is fully redundant and is predominantly a Dell-based investment of hardware, and obviously looking to continue to standardize down that path. In addition to the support services we provide, we also, and cloud services, we also provide a range of internet connectivity offerings. Now look, the webinar here is not with intent to sell those things. However, obviously if you're going to go down the path of placing your servers within a co-located cloud infrastructure, connectivity is one of the key kind of considerations when it comes to that. So there are a range of options available. If you have any more specific questions around that, obviously happy to take those offline. But for the most part, it relates to our ability to either provide internet connectivity directly to your office, receive peering from you from a number of different vendors, or simply more conveniently setting up site-to-site VPN if at all required, and that's all kind of built in within the management console itself. So how we can leverage it? So obviously some of the things that people are concerned about when it comes to moving infrastructure to the cloud is how we can continue to maintain ownership. You know, how is this data, these servers that I'm releasing to an external service provider, something that I can still treat like a physical box within my office? So what I'm going to do is provide a bit of a demonstration of the portal itself in a moment, and through that I'd like to demonstrate to you, I suppose, the level of control you have over the machines themselves hosted in the system. So that relates to things like console level access to the servers, the ability to restart, add resources, things of that nature. So it's fairly autonomous, fairly self-serving in that regard, and obviously that places a lot of control. We do have engineers behind the scenes for any custom needs that you require, which do occasionally come up. The data ownership ultimately will continue to be yours, so there are no concerns around that. At any point in time, if data access to VHDs and the things of that nature are required, we're quite happy to facilitate that, pending potential labour costs depending on the complexity of that work. But what we would recommend is that if there are, I suppose, hurdles to releasing your data to an external provider, some of the best ways that you can kind of deal with that are really just to facilitate backup and replication of your data to other separate resources. So we've not yet seen an issue with customers of this concern, but I do know that it often plays a factor in the decision-making process. Okay, so leading into a bit of an overview of the portal. So the brief topics that we'll be covering up on today is, first of all, how to sign up, how to then log in to the various portals, and then we'll just cover off on three kind of key, more common tasks. So things like how to set up the network, how to create a virtual machine, which is obviously the first of your potentially many servers, and then potentially, if needed after that, how to change the resources allocated to those servers. So with that in mind, I'll lead in. So at this point, I'm sure you've all seen the Connecting Up site itself. There is a page dedicated to this particular service, which I'm sure if you Google will come up. And so within this particular page, assuming you've already got a Connecting Up account, you should be able to just go through, have a bit of a read, and proceed to any sort of sign-up process that you'll see here. There's a bit of detail on the page that just relates to things like some of the more obvious plans available and some of the additions that you can assign on to that. Ultimately, once that's gone through, you'll find yourself at a page like this. And this particular page we'll cover off on a couple of different options. So there's a bit of detail around price comparison through other vendors, so just justification around the money that's being spent. Some of the more frequently asked questions, terms and conditions, all things that obviously you can read in your own time. Feel free to pass any questions along as required. For the most part though, if you're actually past the decision-making point, you'll need to sign up. So we offer two ways that this can occur, assisted or self-service. And so ultimately, assisted is for those organizations either without internal technical resources or whereby you have, I suppose, custom requirements whereby the more automated self-service functions may not be applicable. At which point, if you were to click that, it's simply serving an inquiry to us that we can then contact you and facilitate those requirements. If you believe, though, that you can just jump straight in and start running up servers, then the self-service sign-up is for you. So if we were to click on this, you'll then find a bit of a sign-up portal. The key requirement here is that you need to have an ABN that is charity registered. If you go ahead and fill that number in, it's going to do a bit of a search and obviously fill out the remaining details. So with that said and done, what I prepared earlier, after you receive that, you'll receive a bit of an email. So I'll just quickly show you an example email of what you would see. Sorry, one sec. Okay, so once signed up, we'll be starting to receive some confirmation emails. You'll notice they'll come from connecting up at rgtech.com.au. There's a range of different ones all relating to the various products that you've signed up for, confirmation of account, invoices once the subscriptions are signed up, and formally obviously a welcome email. So you'll see this one obviously has the links in it. So the two key areas that you want to have access to is billing and the infrastructure as a service portal itself. The infrastructure as a service portal, once you've signed up, you'll receive a login for it, and you'll find yourself at a page like this. At which point you can then log in with the password that you would have supplied during the sign-up process. And as I discussed earlier, you'll find yourself at, for some people, a fairly familiar console looking very much like Azure itself. The first thing you'll need to do is create a subscription. So the subscriptions come in a couple of different variants, mainly just simply relating to the number or pool of resources that you require. So if you go New, Account, and then Subscription, you'll find those three key offerings. Basically, the ones we have here, Basic, Standard, and Enterprise. The details for those are visible here in the portal, and obviously more detail available on that connecting up screen from earlier. Once done, you will then basically receive allocation of those resources. So in the case of this enterprise plan here, we can see we've got 24 virtual CPUs, 96 gig of RAM, and 1.2 terabyte of disk storage, along with some internet usage. You'd click tick, and that would go ahead and allocate that subscription to your plan, which I've already done. If you have additional requirements that sit slightly outside of those three options, you also have the ability to create add-ons. So add-ons are in the way of slight additions to some of the resources you require, whether that be through CPU and RAM, storage, or just simply reporting on some of your Windows licensing. Something to note is you'll see that RAM and CPU are linked together as a common add-on rather than being separately allocated. The primary reason for that is that to achieve some of the cost effectiveness that we're providing through the solution, we need to take into account that, that there is ultimately a ratio of how much CPU and RAM any one system can have. So to put that into context, we can't have a customer with, say, 2 vCPUs and 100 gig of RAM because we would quickly run out of vCPUs even though they're not allocated. So bringing those things into line just makes sure that we're achieving that density and appropriately getting the pricing onto you. So with that said and done, I will then be receiving a subscription. So if I was to come into here into my account and subscriptions, you'll see the subscription that was created earlier. I can click on the subscription itself and see what sort of resources have been allocated from that plan. So you see here, obviously, those same metrics from before, the 24 CPUs, the RAM, and the disk. And at this stage, no real fixed quantity around the number of virtual machines that you can have within a plan, assuming the resources are available. Once that's said and done, you want to jump straight in and start creating your systems. Our advice is to create the network first. So the network is basically, for all intents and purposes, a switch that ties the servers together. And it also allocates a public IP address with which you can allocate your port forwarding and external service routing through. We then have the ability to select network. Now, bearing in mind, there might be reasons why you need multiple networks, whether that be through DMZ requirements or just simply separation of roles within fundamentally the same invoicing plan. Okay, oops, sorry, something didn't quite go straight there. Give that one a go. Apologies, this is always the case when you demonstrate technology. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create our test server. So we now have a test server in place. And before I run that server up from to completion, we might want to actually modify some of those resources allocated. So once this is finished, we will then click on the server itself. And you'll see some things around configuration of additional resources. Okay, so notably, obviously, there's a disk requirement here. Some of the usage of the system. It's still obviously provisioning, so just have to bear with us a moment. Okay. While that's going on, it'll just take a moment. I might move on to the next point. Licensing considerations. So, as many of you are not-for-profits, I'm sure you would be aware of the access to things like donor tech licensing. One of the most important parts of the donor tech licensing that's provided is that it falls under the context of open licensing with software assurance. Now, this actually plays a very important point when it comes to using systems within infrastructure as a service. Software assurance actually includes a use called license mobility. License mobility basically means that you have access to use that license and relocate it and reuse it within infrastructure as a service providers. There's a bit of paperwork involved, and we would encourage you to contact us during the sign-up process to facilitate that. But in short, it means that should you have existing investments in things like SQL, Exchange, and other kind of back office requirements, you can reuse those licensing investments without having to pay additionally. There are some notable exclusions, unfortunately, and they mainly relate to Windows itself and Office. So you'll still need to pay for use to Windows, and if you're running a terminal server type environment, you will need to still pay for Office. However, all the other investments behind the scenes, SharePoint, Dynamics, et cetera, should all be things that you can bring across as part of your license mobility. Which brings me on to the next point, being service provider licensing. Service provider licensing is basically an arrangement whereby we, as a service provider, need to report to Microsoft and various other vendors around the types of licensing used within the environment. This is done on a monthly basis and incurs a monthly cost. Obviously, that monthly cost is then passed on to you, the consumer. What our recommendation is that you take advantage of the license mobility to reduce your SPLA costs, and if there are overage requirements, so whether that be through Office and Windows as I mentioned, or simply that you need to spill outside of your DonorTech type requirements, you can obviously pay a discounted rate on the SPLA itself. That obviously has obligations, so there are reporting that you need to facilitate around the number of licensing used, and obviously that then reciprocates with an invoice back to you. Your obligations are that reporting must be done. We won't ask you to report each and every single month if there is no change. However, we won't ask or chase you if there are changes within your environment. The onus is on you to report those changes to us. There are some other vendors that this applies to. So if you would like access to things like Citrix, use of Veeam, the backup product, Trend Micro as an antivirus solution, those three vendors also have comparable options to pay and use that on a monthly arrangement. Most other vendors will have their own terms and conditions around the legitimacy of the use of their software within cloud infrastructure environments. However, for the most part, when it comes to third-party vendors, it's a case of if you own it, you can use it. Okay, so with that in mind, I'll just quickly step back to our provisioning portal. Okay, I'm not having much luck with this particular one, so I might just quickly step out of this particular login and I'll try another one that I know already has some virtual machines in place. So once again, here's one we prepared earlier. So within this particular portal, you will see that we have a network and a range of virtual machines. You'll see within those virtual machines that I have the ability to select the virtual machine. So say, for example, this particular domain controller here. I have the ability to then administrate this server. So if I click on Dashboard, you'll see down the bottom that I have a range of options around connecting to, pausing, restarting, and shutting down. If I click Connect, I'm presented with actually two options. Now this is a really, really important point. Clicking Console here will open up what is an RDP type access to the system. However, it's done so at the hypervisor layer, which means that you can restart the machine, you can be pre-Windows, and you'll still have access to the virtual machine screen itself. You'll see that will go through. So this is how we would go about configuring, as I said, pre-Windows environments. You'll see here. And you can then administrate it like you would any other RDP level access. One notable thing to bear in mind is that when it comes to resource allocation, the system must be turned off in order to facilitate those changes. So whilst we do appreciate that Windows itself has the ability to do things like expanding disk, unfortunately the Azure PAC system does not. So in order to allocate additional resources, I would need to shut this system down. So I might just do that. These are non-production, so that's okay. Okay, so with that said and done, you'll see here that I have the ability to do things like attach. So I've got attach down the bottom, and that would allow me to add, say, a different network, an additional disk, or potentially an ISO from a DVD. I can select on an existing disk and expand. And so you see here that I have then a slider with which to allocate additional gigabytes. Obviously this then comes out of the storage pool that's allocated to your plan. So it's pretty straightforward process. So what are the different pricing options? So as mentioned, there are the basic plan, the standard plan, and the enterprise plan. And these are initially on first release just some plans we've identified as being kind of generalized to the types of size organizations that would facilitate those budgets. The inclusions of what is within each of those plans is clearly documented on the site. However, at this stage, if you have requirements that fit somewhere between those plans, that's when the add-ons would come into play. So we would recommend that you take advantage of, say, the basic plan. Use it. If you require additional resources, allocate those resources through the add-on. And if you get to a point whereby you're starting to tip more into something that would be more economical, say, within the standard plan, then there is a transition process that we can take you through. Obviously, if those resources are forward thought, then simply allocate that from the start. Some things to note. So capping off, the Microsoft licensing may be transferred through license mobility. There are some caveats. If you are unsure as to what those are, as I said, the key ones are Windows and Office. However, please feel free to pass through any inquiries to us if you want to talk over your existing license requirements. The additional CPU, RAM, disk transit, and SPLA licensing are all available at discounted rates through the add-ons. And if at all required, whether it be through customization or just access to technical resources, there is additional services we can provide through the implementation process. These also potentially can include assessment around the viability of cloud for your particular organization. Okay, so some of the things you need to know about your qualification. So the solution is available to any organizations currently registered with Connecting Up. Obviously, by now, if that's one of you, you would have access to the existing Connecting Up portal, and obviously you'll find your way to the page there. I'm quite happy to share these slides out, and obviously it'll have those links in as well. So with that said and done, I'd like to pass it over to anyone who has any questions. So Tori.
Thank you. It doesn't look like we've got any questions at the moment. We'll just give everyone 2 minutes to just think if they've got any questions at all. If there was anything else you wanted to share, Jason, yeah, by all means do, and that might alert someone to that they may have a question on something. So we'll just give everyone a couple of minutes.
Yeah, not a worries. So look, just I suppose to create some creative thought around the types of things that you need to consider. We've covered off on licensing as discussed. Connectivity is a big one though. So obviously if you're going to go to the trouble of moving systems that may otherwise be currently internal within an organization to infrastructure as a service, you're essentially placing an internet connection between the servers and your office. Now for some systems that works better than others, and each system will need to be carefully considered. But what that means, though, is that connectivity becomes a particularly key point. So as I mentioned earlier in the piece, there is a range of ways that can be addressed, whether that be through site-to-site VPN, which is something that you can just generally manage straight out of the console itself. So I'll come back to that. That was within, if I go here, site-to-site VPN, you can see that I can go ahead and create those details and configure that with any sort of VPN-based equipment that I may have on premise at the moment. If you have an existing private IP implementation and you would like to benefit from continuing to use that and link your servers to it, then by all means we are more than open to receiving tails or peering from you in that regard. Obviously that cost would be something you would need to consider as part of the solution. We can meet you at a couple of different points of presence, but once again that might be something if you have a specific need to take with us offline, and I can put you in touch with our networking team. Lastly, if this is a new solution for you and the internet connectivity is either not under contract or something that you would prefer to place within the same provider, we have a national reach when it comes to internet connectivity as well. So we can provide connectivity down into your office or offices, and obviously provide you an additional level of control. So some of the things whereby that's relevant is if you, say for example, have additional firewall requirements outside of those available through the base system. So that might be content filtering type requirements, it might be additional kind of security and reporting around internet usage and such. These are all things that are available as add-ons and typically paired with a internet connectivity delivery outside of the solution itself. Any questions at this point?
There is one question. Tim asks, what is your connectivity like in Tasmania?
Sure. So look, obviously when it comes to access to carriers, we ourselves are what's called an aggregator. So what that means is that we use the major players like Telstra, Optus, ABT, etc. To provide the various tails. So it's not necessarily a question of how our connectivity is, as much as it is the various vendors that we use, and I would be very confident in saying that that any connectivity you could provide or receive from an existing vendor would be something we'd be able to deliver down to you. The connectivity of the solution itself, obviously, is, as I mentioned before, is placed within a data center, so there is a seemingly unlimited amount of bandwidth available to you. However, we are quite conscious on the fact that each plan does have limitations around the amount of bandwidth available to it. So initially we do limit transit, as an example, to about 20 megabits per second. However, there are often special requirements to increase that, so that those can be facilitated sometimes at cost. So feel free, if you have those types of requirements, to pass through that type of inquiry to us.
Thanks, Jason. Tim's also got another question. Where is your data center located?
Not a worries. So I mentioned that briefly earlier. So Brisbane Technology Park is a location here in the Greater Brisbane area. Our particular data centre is a place called Host Networks. If you were to do a quick Google on that, you'll probably see it on the map. But fundamentally, it's in a suburb called 8 Mile Plains. A bit of context around the facility, and I suppose considerations for things like geographical considerations. Those of you may be aware there were things like flood events and stuff in the not too recent history, in the fairly recent history of Brisbane. This particular facility is well above any of those flood lines, and we have many successful use case scenarios of customers who had sites affected by things like floods and other major events that were able to continue operating through those events because their systems were separately hosted in the cloud facility.
Thanks, Jason. It looks like we've got no further questions.
Sure.
That pretty much brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Ryan, for presenting today, and thank you everyone else for participating. If you do have any questions for Jason or Ryan, I think they've got a slide with their email address on it. Also, if you can't get to that one, you can also email events@connectingup.org. So as I said before, we will be sending an email with the presentation and slides attached. As there's no further questions though, thank you everyone and have a lovely day.
Thank you. Thanks.